Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. The smell of roasted turkey, the chatter of relatives crammed into my parents' house, the football game playing faintly in the background. It always felt like home. But this year was different. My name's Bryan. I'm 31, and this was the first time in 3 years that I agreed to join my family for the big dinner. You'd think a reunion after so long would be warm, but my family has a way of turning everything into a competition. The moment I walked in, I felt it. That subtle hush when someone unexpected enters. My mom hugged me, but it was one of those quick, polite hugs, not the kind you give your son you haven't seen in months. My dad gave me a stiff pat on the back and asked, "Still busy with whatever it is you do?" As if I spend my days knitting socks in a basement. I run my own small business. Not flashy, but it's mine, and it's doing well enough that I've built a quiet life away from the family chaos. Then there's my older brother, Jason. Golden child, family favorite, whatever you want to call him. He's the type who still brags about his high school football trophies at 34 and manages to turn every conversation into a subtle flex. He's married to Amanda, who has the sharpest passive-aggressive smile you'll ever see, and they've been trying for a baby for years. According to my mom, this struggle somehow elevates them into sainthood status, and every family event revolves around them. When I sat down at the table, Jason's first words to me were, "Still single and wasting your life?" He said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, like he was tossing a grenade and waiting for the explosion. The table chuckled. My uncle even laughed out loud and muttered something about, finally someone saying it. My face burned, but I swallowed it. I've learned that clapping back too early just turns me into the bad guy. So I played along, shrugged, and said something like that. But I could feel the knot forming in my stomach. It's wild how quickly you can be turned into a caricature of yourself around family. To them, I was still single Bryan, the guy who couldn't settle down, who never gave his parents grandkids. They didn't know the truth, and I hadn't told them, not because I was hiding anything, but because I learned the hard way that my family likes to take good news and turn it into gossip fuel. As the dinner went on, I noticed little digs thrown my way. Mom asked if I'd finally figured out how to cook a proper meal since I lived alone. My aunt asked if I was still in that tiny apartment, even though I'd bought a house last year. Every detail about my life felt like an opportunity for them to poke and prod, while Jason and Amanda's every word was met with glowing praise. When Jason announced that they were starting another round of fertility treatments, my parents actually toasted to it, as if this was the most important update of the night. I smiled, but inside, I was fuming. It wasn't jealousy. It was the way my family had decided that my life was somehow less worthy of respect just because I hadn't given them a Hallmark card version of adulthood. I tried to focus on the food, the warmth of the fireplace, anything that could keep me from snapping back. And then the doorbell rang. All conversation stopped for a moment. My mom frowned and said, "Who's that?" My heart started pounding because I knew exactly who it was, and I hadn't warned anyone. The door opened, and there she was, my wife, Emily, stepping in with her coat still dusted with snow, holding our sleepy baby boy against her shoulder. "Sorry we're late," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying just enough for everyone to hear. Then she looked at me and smiled, that warm, grounding smile that never fails to calm me down. "Daddy, he's awake," she said, and gently passed our son to me. My son stretched his tiny arms toward me and said, clear as day, "Papa." You could hear a pin drop. Jason's smirk froze on his face. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad just blinked like he was processing what was happening. I held my son close, kissed his head, and looked around the room. That was the exact moment everything shifted. The silence in the room was almost funny. For years, my family had written me off as the screw-up who couldn't settle down, the guy who would probably end up alone with a cat. And now, here I was, holding my son, a living, breathing curveball, and watching their carefully built assumptions about me crack right down the middle. Emily stepped inside fully, brushing snow from her hair, and gave everyone a polite smile. "Hi, everyone," she said, as if this was just a normal family gathering and not a full-blown social earthquake. Mom was the first to recover. "Bryan, you have a baby?" she stammered. "Yeah," I said simply, bouncing my son on my hip. "This is Nathan." Jason let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. You actually went and had a kid before me." His tone wasn't congratulatory. It was competitive, like I'd scored a point on him in some game he thought only he was playing. Amanda's face was frozen in that polite smile, but her eyes were darting between me, Emily, and the baby like she'd just seen someone sneak a dessert onto the table without saying grace first. Mom's voice shot up an octave. Why didn't you tell us, Bryan? This is huge. How long have you been married? When did this happen? Why would you hide something like this from us? Her questions came rapid fire, like bullets, and suddenly everyone was staring, waiting for me to explain myself like a kid caught sneaking in past curfew. Emily glanced at me, sensing my tension, and squeezed my arm gently. I took a deep breath. We didn't hide anything, I said, keeping my tone even. We just wanted to enjoy some peace and quiet for a while. Not everything has to be a big production. Jason snorted. Peace and quiet? What? You think you're some kind of celebrity who needs privacy? You couldn't even tell your own family. My jaw tightened. Jason, we've been married for 2 years. We had a small ceremony, just a few close friends. We sent out announcements. Not to us, Mom said sharply. I would have remembered. That stung, but it also made me want to laugh. Mom, I mailed one to you guys. I even texted you pictures. Her brow furrowed. I never saw them. I didn't push it. There was no point reminding her about the dozens of times my calls went unanswered or my texts got one-word replies. They had chosen to stay out of my life, and I had stopped chasing them for attention a long time ago. Nathan reached out and grabbed my shirt collar, babbling happily, and Emily smiled at him. The sight made my chest warm, but when I looked back at my family, their expressions were a mix of shock, suspicion, and something that felt dangerously close to resentment. Dinner turned into an interrogation. Between bites of turkey, my dad asked about my job like he was cross-examining me in court. So your business is actually doing well enough to support a family? Yes, I said evenly. Jason leaned back in his chair with a smirk. What is it again that you do? Selling stuff online, right? It's an e-commerce business, Jason, I said, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. And yes, it's doing well. Better than I ever expected, actually. Amanda chimed in sweetly. Must be nice not having to worry about student loans or real bills. Emily spoke up then, her voice calm but firm. Bryan worked 2 jobs for years to pay off those loans before we met. He's worked hard for everything we have. That shut Amanda up for a second, but I could feel the air getting colder. Jason changed the subject, or tried to. So where's your house? Apartment? You guys live nearby. We bought a house last year, I said. About 20 minutes from here. Mom blinked, shocked again. You bought a house and never told us. I set my fork down, my patience thinning. You didn't exactly ask, Mom. Every time I called, you were too busy telling me about Jason's job promotions or Amanda's spa weekends. After a while, I figured maybe you weren't interested. The words hung heavy in the air. Dad frowned. That's not fair. We care about you. I nodded slowly. Do you? Because tonight is the first time in 3 years anyone's asked me how I'm doing. And even then, it was followed by Jason mocking me for being single. Jason raised his hands defensively. Hey, it was a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Emily shot him a look that could have frozen lava. A joke at someone else's expense isn't a joke. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. I could feel everyone squirming in their seats, not used to me talking back. I usually kept my head down, kept the peace, let Jason and my parents run the show. Not tonight. Then, just when I thought the tension might finally break, Grandma spoke up from the end of the table. She'd been quiet all night, but her words hit like a hammer. I think it's wonderful that Bryan has a family now, she said. But maybe if he'd trusted us enough to tell us earlier, we wouldn't all be sitting here so shocked. The implication was clear. Somehow, this was my fault. I was the one who disrupted Thanksgiving with my secret wife and baby. I was the one who should have told them. Never mind that they'd made me feel like an outsider for years. Emily looked at me again, silently asking if we should leave. I shook my head. Not yet. Something inside me shifted that night. For years, I played the role they assigned me. The quiet son, the black sheep, the one they could laugh at to make themselves feel better. But as I sat there holding my son, listening to them try to twist this moment into something wrong, I felt a resolve settling into my bones. They wanted to act like they were owed access to my life, like they had some claim on my happiness just because we shared DNA. But the truth was, they hadn't been there for me when it mattered. And now that I finally had something good, a wife I adored, a son who lit up when he saw me, a business that gave us freedom. They thought they could just waltz back in and demand front row seats. Not this time. I smiled politely, nodded along to the rest of dinner, but inside, I was already making a decision. Things were going to change, and the next words out of Jason's mouth would be the final straw. Jason leaned back in his chair like he owned the room, one hand behind his head, the other swirling his wine. He was clearly enjoying the spectacle. The attention had shifted off him and Amanda's fertility updates and landed squarely on me. I could see that glint in his eyes, the one he always got before saying something meant to cut deep while pretending it was just teasing. "So," he said loudly, making sure everyone was listening, "are we even sure this kid is yours?" The words dropped like a bomb. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Even Amanda's head snapped toward him, eyes wide, but he didn't back down. He smirked and shrugged. "I mean, come on, Bryan. You disappear for years, suddenly show up with a wife and a baby, and expect us to believe you didn't just rush into something because you were lonely?" The air in the room thickened instantly. Emily froze, clutching her napkin so tightly her knuckles went white. My chest went hot, not the embarrassed kind of hot, but the kind that comes right before you lose your temper. "Jason," my dad said warningly, but there was no real bite to it, more like a token scolding. I set my fork down slowly and looked right at Jason. "Say that again," I said, my voice low, calm, too calm. Jason smirked wider. "Relax, man. It was a joke. You know how many guys end up finding out the kid isn't theirs? It happens all the time." "You're talking about my wife and my son," I said. "Do you hear yourself right now?" Amanda put a hand on Jason's arm, maybe trying to get him to stop, but he just shrugged her off. "All I'm saying is it's convenient. You never said a word about dating anyone. You didn't invite us to the wedding, and now you show up like some hero with a baby on Thanksgiving? Forgive us for being skeptical." The table was dead silent. Even Grandma stopped chewing. Emily spoke, her voice icy but measured. "I think we've heard enough, Jason." But he wasn't done. "Hey, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Bryan's always been the irresponsible one, skipping family events, running off to do his own thing, never keeping us in the loop. Now suddenly he's the perfect family man? I mean, come on. It's a little hard to swallow." That did it. I set Nathan gently in his high chair. Emily had brought it in from the car earlier, and stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to make everyone flinch. "You know what, Jason?" I said, staring him down. "You've been jealous of me since we were kids, but I never thought you'd stoop this low." "Jealous?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Of you? Please. What do you have that I'd ever want?" I took a step closer to him, keeping my voice even. "A life that isn't built on tearing other people down. A wife who actually loves me. A son who will grow up knowing his dad didn't waste his life competing with his brother." Jason's smirk faltered, just for a second, but then Mom jumped in. "All right, that's enough. Bryan, sit down." Jason was out of line, but there's no need to make a scene. I turned to her slowly. "A scene? He just questioned the paternity of your grandson, and you're worried about a scene?" Mom looked flustered. "This is Thanksgiving. We don't need drama at the table." That was the moment I realized where I stood in this family. Jason could humiliate me, insult my wife, even imply my son wasn't mine, and Mom's priority was keeping the dinner peaceful. Emily reached for my hand under the table, a silent reminder not to let them get the best of me. I sat back down, not because they told me to, but because I wanted to control how this played out. Dinner limped on after that, but the air was thick with tension. No one looked me in the eye except Grandma, who gave me a faint nod. Whether it was approval or pity, I couldn't tell. Jason avoided my gaze completely now, focusing on his plate, though every now and then he muttered something under his breath to Amanda that made her purse her lips and glance at us with that sharp little look of hers. Then came dessert. Pumpkin pie, apple pie, whipped cream, the works. Normally my favorite part of the night, but this time, it was just another stage for Jason to perform on. "So, Bryan," he said as Mom sliced the pies, "you planning on baptizing the kid? Or are you going to keep that a secret too?" Emily stiffened, but before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, that's a good question. We'll need to know so we can plan the family gathering." I looked at her, stunned. "Plan? Mom, you haven't been to any of the milestones in my life so far. What makes you think you're entitled to this one?" Mom's face went red. "Entitled? We're your family." "Exactly," I said quietly. Which is why it hurts that the only time you all pay attention to me is when there's something you can criticize. Jason let out a low whistle again, clearly enjoying the fallout now that he'd stirred the pot. Guess you're still the sensitive one, he said. Emily turned to him, her voice calm but cutting. Or maybe he's just tired of being treated like the family punching bag. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. Nobody's treating him like that, she said weakly. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You've all been doing it all night. And for years before that. But I guess it's easier to paint me as the problem than to admit that maybe this family isn't as perfect as it thinks it is. The room went quiet again. I glanced at the clock. We'd been there less than 2 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Nathan was fussing now, probably sensing the tension, and Emily began packing up his things without a word. Mom looked panicked. You're not leaving, are you? We still have dessert. Emily smiled politely. I think we've had enough for tonight. Nathan needs to get to bed. Jason muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Or maybe Daddy just can't handle a little heat. I stopped in my tracks, turned back, and met his eyes one last time. Careful, Jason, I said softly. You keep pushing, and one day you're going to find out I'm not the same kid you used to pick on. And you won't like what happens next. His smirk finally faltered for good. We left shortly after, the cold night air hitting my face like a reset button. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded, though my jaw was still clenched. Yeah, I'm just done letting them treat me like this. Things are going to change. And for the first time in years, I meant it. Because this wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. This was about setting boundaries, about finally standing up for the life I'd built, and making sure they understood that they didn't get to belittle it anymore. The next time I saw my family, I wouldn't just be defending myself. I'd be making a point they'd never forget. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Nathan had fallen asleep in his car seat, his little chest rising and falling softly, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside his father. Emily kept one hand on my knee the whole way, saying nothing, just letting me sit with my thoughts. Normally, I hated silence. It left too much room for the past to creep in, but tonight, I needed it. I needed to hear the thoughts I'd been pushing away for years. I thought about every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family barbecue where I'd been the punchline. Jason's jokes about me never settling down. Dad's condescending little comments about how he was just waiting for me to get serious about life. Mom's constant comparisons between me and Jason, like we were contestants in some endless competition for her approval. I'd spent my 20s bending over backward trying to prove myself. I took every extra shift I could get, worked 2 jobs just to save enough money to start my business. I didn't ask them for help, not once, because I wanted them to see me as independent, capable, worth respecting. And still, every time I showed up, I was treated like the kid brother who could never measure up. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as I remembered last year's Christmas, the one I'd skipped. Jason had posted photos on Facebook of the whole family in matching pajamas, opening gifts, smiling like a Hallmark card. Not a single person had texted to ask why I wasn't there. It had been easier to sit alone in my apartment than to face that room full of fake cheer and barbed jokes. When we got home, Emily carried Nathan upstairs while I sat down on the couch, staring at the darkened TV. The house was warm and quiet, everything we had worked so hard to build together. Emily came back down a few minutes later, sat next to me, and tucked her legs under her. You handled yourself better than I think I would have, she said softly. I let out a humorless laugh. I didn't feel like I handled anything. I just sat there and let them drag me through the mud. You stood up for yourself, she said, reaching over to take my hand. I saw the look on your brother's face. He's not used to you pushing back. That was something. I shook my head. It didn't feel like enough. Jason sat there implying Nathan wasn't even mine. And my parents, acted like I was the one ruining Thanksgiving. Like I was the problem for not telling them about you, about the house, about our son. And the worst part is, I knew this would happen. That's why I didn't tell them. That's why I kept our life separate. Emily stayed quiet, letting me get it out. I'm just tired, I said finally, the words heavy in my throat. I'm tired of being the outsider in my own family. I'm tired of acting like I'm okay with their little digs, their passive-aggressive comments, their way of pretending Jason is perfect, and I'm just the screw-up who got lucky. I'm tired of showing up to these dinners hoping this time will be different, and leaving feeling like I got punched in the gut. Emily squeezed my hand. Then stop showing up, she said simply. The idea sat between us like a stone. Stop showing up. I can't just cut them off, I said automatically, even as the thought took root. Why not? Emily asked gently. What are you getting out of this, Bryan? Every time we go over there, you come home miserable. You spend the next week replaying every insult in your head. And then you go back and let them do it again. For what? Because it's tradition? Her words weren't angry, but they hit hard because they were true. Tradition, obligation, guilt. Those had been the strings pulling me back to that house year after year, no matter how much it hurt. That night, after Emily went to bed, I stayed up late, sitting in the dark with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator for company. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Nathan's first steps, his first birthday, Emily's radiant smile at our tiny wedding ceremony. And it hit me like a punch to the chest how much they'd missed. Not just because I hadn't told them, but because they hadn't cared enough to ask. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, but also a strange clarity. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like running back to smooth things over. I didn't feel the urge to call Mom and explain myself, or to text Jason some half-hearted joke to diffuse the tension. I just let the silence sit. Days passed. Mom sent a single text 2 days later. We missed you at dessert. Hope Nathan's doing okay. No mention of the things Jason had said. No apology. Just an attempt to pretend nothing had happened. I didn't reply. Jason, on the other hand, posted a photo on social media with the caption, "Great Thanksgiving with the family." Well, most of it. The comments were full of their friends cooing about how cute Amanda looked, how they couldn't wait for Jason to have kids of his own. I scrolled past it without liking it. The more distance I put between myself and them, the clearer everything became. For years, I'd been so desperate for their approval that I'd let them define my worth. Every success I had felt like it needed to be presented to them like a trophy. Every failure felt like confirmation of their low expectations. But now I had my own little family. Emily and Nathan didn't need me to prove anything. They just needed me to show up, to be present, to love them. And I did. The more I focused on that, the less power my parents and Jason had over me. And yet, as freeing as it felt, there was still a hollow ache in my chest every time I thought about how easily they dismissed what Jason said. How no one, not my mom, not my dad, not even Grandma, had defended me. It wasn't just about respect anymore. It was about dignity. One night, about a week later, I was working late in my office when Emily came in with a mug of tea. "You've been quiet all week," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. I nodded. "I've been thinking. About Thanksgiving? About everything," I admitted. "About how they treat me. About how they treat you. About how they're going to treat Nathan one day if we keep letting them have access to us without any boundaries." Emily's expression softened. "What do you want to do?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. "I want them to understand. Not just that they hurt me. They'll never care about that. I want them to understand that they don't get to treat me like this and still expect me to show up smiling. I want them to feel the weight of what they've done." Emily tilted her head, a little cautious but also curious. "That sounds like more than just staying away." I smiled faintly. "It is. I think it's time to stop playing defense. Time to set the record straight." That night, I sat down and started writing. Not a text, not an email, but a letter, long, detailed, honest. Every memory of being dismissed, every comment that stuck in my head long after the dinner ended, every moment I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. I didn't know yet if I was going to send it, but writing it out felt like taking control back, piece by piece. I didn't just want them to know how I felt. I wanted them to see the version of me they'd never bothered to see. The husband, the father, the man who built something from nothing. And as the days turned into weeks, something else started happening. The calls started coming more frequently. First Mom, then Dad, then even Jason. At first it was just checking in. Then it was casual invitations. "You should bring Nathan by. We got him a little present." Then it was guilt. "Your grandma misses you. She's been asking why you don't visit anymore." I stayed silent, and the silence began to get to them. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until I stopped answering their calls. At first, it felt wrong, like I was breaking some sacred rule of family, the one that said you had to keep showing up no matter how miserable it made you. But as the days stretched into weeks, I started breathing easier. The house felt lighter, the air clearer. For the first time in years, I could enjoy a weekend without dreading the next family event. Saturday mornings became pancake breakfasts with Emily and Nathan, music playing in the kitchen while Nathan sat in his high chair banging a spoon against the tray like it was a drum. We took walks in the park, visited the farmer's market, stayed up late watching movies. We built our own rhythms, our own traditions. My business was growing too. December was my busiest season, and I threw myself into it. Orders were flying in faster than I could fulfill them, and for once, it felt good to be completely absorbed in something that was mine. Late nights weren't a burden. They were a reminder of how far I'd come since the days of scraping together rent. Emily noticed the change in me before I did. One night, after we'd put Nathan to bed, she sat next to me on the couch and said, "You seem lighter." I looked at her, confused. "Lighter?" "Yeah," she said with a small smile. "Happier. You're not carrying that heaviness anymore. The one you always have after we visit your family." I leaned back and let her words sink in. She was right. I felt taller somehow, like I'd been walking hunched over without realizing it. But just because I was thriving didn't mean my family was done with me. If anything, the quieter I got, the louder they became. It started with small things, a text from Mom asking if we could come by to pick up some things she had for Nathan. I didn't answer. A few days later, Dad left a voicemail saying there was a big family announcement coming up and it wouldn't be right if I wasn't there. Again, I stayed silent. Then Jason called. That one surprised me. Jason never called me directly unless he wanted to brag or borrow something. "Hey man," he said when I finally let it go to voicemail. "Look, about Thanksgiving. I didn't mean to go too far. You know me, I just joke around. Anyway, Mom's getting kind of worried about you going radio silent. Just give her a call, all right?" The message wasn't an apology, not really. It was Jason trying to sweep everything under the rug, to reset things back to the way they'd always been. But I wasn't interested in going back. I let the silence stretch longer. And that's when they started to get desperate. First came the gifts. Packages showed up at our door, baby clothes, toys, books, all with little notes from Mom saying things like, "For our sweet grandson." Emily opened them politely, but set them aside. "She's trying to buy her way back in," she said, not unkindly, just stating the truth. Then came the guilt. Grandma called, her voice wavering. "Bryan, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on between you and your parents, but you can't just stay away forever. Family is family." I almost broke then. Almost. But I thought about Thanksgiving. About Jason's smirk, Mom's demand that I sit down and keep the peace, Dad's silence through it all. I thought about Nathan growing up watching me swallow my pride just to keep everyone else comfortable. "Grandma," I said gently, "I love you, but I can't come back until things change. And right now, I don't think anyone wants to change." There was a long pause on the other end. "They'll never change if you stay away," she said softly. "Maybe," I said, "but I won't change if I go back." After that, I threw myself even harder into building something better. My business hit record numbers that quarter. I hired 2 part-time assistants to keep up with orders. Emily and I started talking seriously about buying a second property, an investment for Nathan's future. It felt like everything was clicking into place. And that's when my parents tried to pull me back in one last time. It was late January when I got the text. "Mom again. We're hosting a dinner next weekend. Jason and Amanda have big news. It would mean a lot if you came." I stared at the message for a long time. Emily came up behind me, read it over my shoulder, and said, "Are you going to respond?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it like all the others. But part of me thinks maybe it's time. "Time for what?" Emily asked gently. I turned to look at her, feeling something solidify inside me. Time to stop hiding. Time to show them exactly who we are. That week, I prepared carefully. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to walk in on my own terms. I bought Nathan a tiny button-up shirt and little shoes that made him look like a miniature gentleman. Emily wore the navy dress I loved, the one that made her look effortlessly put together. And I put on the watch I'd bought myself after my business turned its first big profit, a reminder of what I'd built and how far I'd come without their help. When we pulled up to my parents' house, my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked to the door. "You ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. The door opened, and there they were, Mom, Dad, Jason, Amanda, even Grandma, all waiting like we were the main event. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mom stepped forward, a little too brightly. "Bryan, you came." I smiled politely. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. As we stepped inside, I could feel every eye on us. Nathan clung to my shoulder, looking around curiously, and Emily greeted everyone with quiet warmth. Jason was the first to break the silence. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I smiled at him, calm and steady. "Yeah, we figured it was time." Something in my tone must have thrown him off, because for once, he didn't have a quick comeback. Dinner started off civil enough, but I could feel the tension buzzing under the surface. This wasn't just a meal. This was a test, one I didn't intend to fail. Jason eventually stood up, cleared his throat, and made his announcement. Amanda was pregnant. The room erupted into cheers and congratulations, and I meant it when I said, "That's great news." But as I watched my parents fawn over them, showering them with praise, I couldn't help but notice the difference in how they'd reacted to my own family news. And that's when I knew this night was going to be the turning point. Not just for me, for all of us. Because I wasn't here just to eat dinner. I was here to change everything. Dinner that night felt almost surreal. The clinking of silverware, the polite laughter, it all seemed louder than usual, like everyone was trying too hard to make it seem normal. Jason basked in the attention, Amanda glowing beside him as my parents peppered them with questions about due dates, names, nursery plans. For a while, I just sat there quietly, letting it wash over me. Emily squeezed my hand under the table and gave me a knowing look, the kind that said, "I see what's happening here, and I know you're holding it together by sheer willpower." Eventually, the questions turned to us. Mom leaned forward, her voice artificially sweet. "So, Bryan, what's new with you two? Any news you'd like to share?" The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I smiled politely. "Business has been good. We've been talking about some investments for the future, maybe a vacation this summer. And Nathan just learned how to say truck, which he's very proud of." There was polite laughter, but I could see it, the faint flicker of disappointment in Mom's face, like she'd been hoping for something bigger, something to match Jason's announcement. And then, like fate itself wanted to give me ammunition, Dad spoke. "Well, I hope you're saving your money. Things are going to get tighter around here once Jason and Amanda's baby comes. Your mother and I promised to help them with the down payment on a bigger house, somewhere the baby can have a yard to play in." I froze. Jason nodded, grinning. "Yeah, we found a place we love. A little over budget, but with Mom and Dad helping out, we should be able to swing it. We're hoping to close by spring." I stared at my parents. "You're helping them buy a house?" Mom didn't even flinch. "Of course we are. It's our first grandchild." "Well, their first child," she corrected quickly. "They need the space." Emily's hand tightened around mine, but I kept my voice level. "When I bought my house, you told me I was being reckless. You said I should wait until I had a real family to justify that kind of expense." Mom pursed her lips. "You didn't ask for help. You didn't offer," I said quietly. Jason rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, Bryan. Are you really going to make this about you? This isn't a competition." I laughed under my breath. "Isn't it? Because somehow it always feels like one." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Grandma, bless her, cleared her throat. "Maybe we should change the subject. We're supposed to be celebrating tonight." And just like that, the conversation moved on, but my mind didn't. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what Dad had said. The house, the down payment, the way my parents were willing to dig into their savings for Jason without hesitation, but had treated my milestones like inconveniences. When we got home and put Nathan to bed, Emily and I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting warm shadows on the walls. "You're quiet," she said gently. I ran a hand through my hair. "They're helping Jason buy a house." "I know," she said softly. "They didn't even think twice about it." I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "When I bought ours, they told me I was being stupid, that I was rushing. And now, they're practically throwing money at him." Emily tilted her head. "So what are you thinking?" I looked at her, feeling something cold and steady settle into place. "I'm thinking I'm done letting them write the narrative. I'm done letting Jason play the golden child while they treat me like an afterthought. If they want a competition, fine. I'll give them one they'll never forget." That night, I stayed up late going through my files, business records, tax returns, contracts. My company had grown more than anyone in my family realized. I'd reinvested nearly everything back into it, and now it was finally paying off. I started making calls the next morning. Not to my family, to my accountant, my lawyer, my realtor. Think of it as future-proofing, I told Emily when she asked what I was doing. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly, carefully. I expanded my business's operations, finalized a deal that had been in the works for months, and moved a sizable chunk of my profits into a trust, one that would eventually be Nathan's. The more I worked, the more focused I became. Every dismissive comment, every joke at my expense, every time they'd made me feel small, it all fueled me. And as if the universe was conspiring to push me over the edge, Jason just couldn't help himself. He called one night out of the blue, his voice smug. "Just thought you'd like to know we got the house," he said. "Big backyard, 2-car garage, the works. You should see Nathan's face when he comes over. He's going to love it." I let him talk, let him go on about paint colors and nursery plans. Then, just as he was about to hang up, he said it. "Guess you should have stuck closer to the family, huh? Might have gotten a little help yourself." And then he laughed. When I hung up, I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the wall. "That's it," I said finally, out loud, to no one. "I'm done." Emily found me in the office later that night, typing furiously at my computer. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making sure that the next time we walk into that house," I said, my voice calm but steely. "They'll finally see me for who I really am. Not the screw-up, not the punchline. The man who doesn't need their approval or their money to build something bigger than they ever imagined." Emily's eyes softened. "Just promise me you won't let this turn ugly." I smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, it won't be ugly. It'll be educational." Because now I had everything I needed. The success, the leverage, the truth. All that was left was the perfect moment to reveal it. And I had a feeling that moment was coming soon. The opportunity came faster than I expected. About a month after Jason's call, Mom sent out a group message. "Family dinner next Sunday. Housewarming for Jason and Amanda. Everyone is invited." The message was cheerful, full of exclamation marks, but I could read between the lines. This wasn't just a housewarming. This was an event to showcase Jason's perfect life, to parade him as the golden child one more time. Emily looked up from her phone when I told her. "You're going?" she asked. "Oh, I'm going," I said. But this time, we're not walking in as spectators. In the week leading up to the dinner, I prepared carefully. I wasn't planning some childish outburst or shouting match that would only prove their point. No, this was going to be measured, controlled, and impossible to ignore. First, I gathered everything I needed. My company's growth reports, the finalized contract for my most recent business deal, and the paperwork for the new property we had just closed on, a lakeside cabin I'd been eyeing for months. It wasn't just a luxury purchase. It was an investment that would appreciate for Nathan's future. Then, I called my lawyer and accountant, making sure all my paperwork was airtight. I didn't want to just talk about my success. I wanted to present it like evidence, undeniable and concrete. Emily helped me pick out my outfit the morning of the dinner. Nothing too flashy, just a well-tailored blazer, clean shoes, the watch that symbolized my turning point. Nathan wore a tiny vest and bow tie that made him look like he was headed to a gala instead of a housewarming party. When we pulled up to Jason's new house, I had to admit, it was nice. Big yard, fresh paint, the kind of place that screamed suburban dream. There were already cars lining the driveway and neighbors milling about, congratulating Jason and Amanda. Mom's face lit up when she saw us walking up the path. Nathan perched on my hip. "Bryan, you made it." I smiled warmly. "Wouldn't miss it." Jason came out, grinning like a politician. Well, look who decided to join the celebration." "Congratulations," I said, shaking his hand. Beautiful house. Inside, the place was buzzing with conversation. Jason led everyone on a grand tour, pointing out the crown molding, the granite countertops, the nursery that was already half set up. Mom and Dad trailed behind, beaming with pride. When we all finally gathered in the living room, Jason raised a glass. "Thanks, everyone, for coming. This house is the start of a new chapter for us. Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad's help. Seriously, you guys made this possible." There was applause, cheers, toasts. And then, like the floor was finally mine, Mom turned to me. "So, Bryan, what's new with you? Business still keeping you busy?" I smiled slowly. "Actually, yeah. It's been a big couple of months." Jason snorted softly. "Oh yeah? What?" "Sold a few more t-shirts online." I didn't bite. Instead, I pulled a thin folder from the inside of my blazer and set it on the coffee table. We just finalized a major contract with a national distributor. Projected revenue for this year is nearly triple what it was last year. The room went quiet. Dad blinked. Triple. I nodded, which is why we decided it was time to make some moves. I pulled out another sheet, the deed to the lakeside cabin. We closed on a second property last week. It's a cabin about an hour from here. Private dock, great for weekends with Nathan. And eventually, it'll be his. Part of the trust we set up for him. Amanda's mouth actually dropped open. Jason's smirk faltered. That's impressive, Dad said finally, sounding almost startled. Emily smiled and rested a hand on my shoulder. Bryan's worked really hard for this. He built all of it from the ground up. Jason cleared his throat, trying to recover. Well, good for you, man. Guess all that time hiding away finally paid off. I looked at him steadily. It wasn't hiding. It was working, and building a life that didn't need your approval to matter. For once, Jason had no comeback. But I wasn't done. I turned to my parents. You know, when I bought our first house, you told me I was being reckless. You said I should wait until I had a family. Now you're helping Jason buy one, and that's fine. I don't need your money. I never did. But I think you should know something. Every time you doubted me, every time you made me feel like I was the irresponsible one, it just pushed me harder. I didn't get here in spite of you. I got here because you taught me exactly what kind of life I didn't want to have. Mom's face went pale. Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I'm not telling you this to brag. I continued, keeping my voice calm. I'm telling you this because I'm done letting you treat me like the family disappointment. I'm not. I have a wife I adore, a son who is my whole world, and a business that's thriving. And if you can't respect that, respect us, then we won't be part of this family drama anymore. You could have heard a pin drop. Grandma was the first to speak, her voice quiet but steady. You're right, she said. You are not the disappointment, Bryan. You never were. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, we just wanted you close. You wanted me obedient, I said gently. And I can't be that for you anymore. I stood up, taking Emily's hand. We should get going. Nathan needs to get to bed. As we left, I felt the weight of a dozen eyes on my back. Jason didn't say another word. Neither did my parents. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small walking out of their house. I felt 10 feet tall. And though I'd said my piece, I knew this wasn't over. Because the silence that followed would be louder than anything I'd said that night, and I was ready to let them sit with it. The drive home from Jason's house that night felt completely different from Thanksgiving. Back then, I'd driven home burning with humiliation, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. This time, there was no anger left, just a quiet, calm satisfaction. Emily held my hand the whole way, and Nathan babbled sleepily in the back seat until he drifted off. You were incredible, Emily said softly. I let out a slow breath, almost a laugh. I didn't even raise my voice. You didn't need to, she said. You finally made them see you. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without replaying every word in my head. No second guessing, no wondering if I should have stayed quiet. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter, clearer, almost giddy. And then the call started. First it was Mom. 2 missed calls, then a text. Can we talk? Please. I waited. Then Dad called. Left a voicemail this time. Son, we should sit down. Work this out like adults. Call me back. Jason, of course, couldn't resist being Jason. He texted, nice performance last night. Hope it was worth making Mom cry. I stared at the message for a long time, then put the phone down without replying. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Mom sent long, rambling texts about how she never meant to make me feel less than and just wanted the family to be close. Dad sent articles about the importance of family bonds, like I was writing a term paper on forgiveness. Even Amanda reached out with a cautious, Jason knows he went too far. He's embarrassed. But the apology I wanted never came. Not once did Jason say, I'm sorry for what I said about your wife and son. Not once did my parents admit that they had treated me unfairly for years. And that was how I knew nothing had really changed, at least not for them. So I made a decision. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not angry, not bitter, just firm. I thanked them for inviting us to the housewarming, told them how proud I was of the life I'd built, and explained, clearly, that until there was real accountability, Until there were real apologies, we would be taking a step back. Emily read it over my shoulder, nodded, and said, "It's perfect." I printed it, sealed it, and mailed it. No text, no email. If they wanted to have a conversation, they would have to do it face to face. And then I waited. Weeks passed. At first, there was silence. Then, one by one, the cracks started to show. Grandma called me first. "I read your letter," she said quietly. "And I think you were right. They've treated you unfairly. I told your father as much." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you. They're not taking it well," she said. "But they're thinking about it. Your mother's been crying. Your father hasn't stopped pacing." I pictured them both in that house, stewing, realizing that their favorite scapegoat wasn't coming back until they changed. And then one night, the doorbell rang. Emily looked at me from the kitchen. "Are you expecting anyone?" I shook my head. When I opened the door, Mom was standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered, her coat buttoned up to her chin, her eyes red. "Bryan," she said softly. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She stood there for a moment, wringing her hands, then finally said, "I came to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not listening. For letting Jason talk to you like that. For not being the kind of mother you needed." I just stood there, letting her words sink in. For years, I had dreamed about this. Not to gloat, not to punish her, but just to hear those words. "Come in," I said finally. She stepped inside, and we sat at the kitchen table. Emily joined us, silent but supportive. Mom took a deep breath. "When you walked out of Jason's house, I realized something," she said. "I realized that I've been so focused on keeping the peace, on making sure everyone looked perfect from the outside, that I didn't see what it was doing to you. I let Jason get away with things I never should have, and I made you feel like you were less than. I hate that I did that." I nodded slowly. "It hurt. For a long time." "I know," she said quietly, "and I want to make it right." For the first time, I believed her. The next weekend, Dad came by. His apology was clumsier, less eloquent, but it was real. "You were right," he said gruffly. "We pushed you too hard. And I let Jason run his mouth when I should have shut him down. Won't happen again." Even Jason eventually called, though it took him the longest. "Look," he said awkwardly. I was out of line. What I said about Emily and Nathan was wrong. "I'm sorry." "Thank you," I said simply. He hesitated. "Are we good?" I thought about it. "We will be. But it's going to take time." And for once, he didn't argue. Over the next few months, things slowly started to shift. The jokes stopped, at least the mean-spirited ones. The conversations became more balanced. When we went to visit, Mom asked about my business with genuine interest. Dad played with Nathan on the floor, building block towers with him until he squealed with laughter. It wasn't perfect, families rarely are, but it was progress. The next Thanksgiving, we hosted dinner at our house. I cooked the turkey. Emily made her famous mashed potatoes, and our dining room was filled with the sound of conversation and laughter that, for once, didn't feel forced. At one point, Jason raised his glass and said, "To Bryan and Emily, thanks for having us, and for putting up with me all these years." Everyone laughed, but this time, it wasn't sharp or mocking. When dessert was finished and everyone was sitting back in their chairs, I looked around the table, at my parents, my brother, my wife, my son, and felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. And as I stood to clear the dishes, I said quietly, almost to myself, but just loud enough for them to hear, "This is what family is supposed to feel like." And for the first time, nobody disagreed.